Hello there, welcome back to the channel, and today we will be reviewing a potentially unknown, highly classified starship that you may not have heard of, called the USS Star Empire. The very existence of the ship is antithetical to the notion and morality of the Federation. And what it was made to do, again, highly suspicious, and what it was made to do was not consistent with the ideals of the Federation. That would be, again, the USS Star Empire. Registry NCC-2116, or commissioned registry MKC-2331. What that means, who knows? But this vessel was a man of war in the truest sense of any Federation vessel of the late 23rd century. Commissioned by Vice Admiral Rittenhouse, this ship was built as a response to escalating conflicts and border skirmishes with the Klingons, and as a show of force, built highly in secret, initially commissioned to be a Federation-class starship. Now, to put a little backstory here and a bit of context, a Federation-class starship, despite superficially looking like a Constitution class, with a third nacelle strapped onto the back and the modifications to the main deflector and a forward-facing shuttle bay, it had lots of communications arrays basically on it. The Federation class was a substantially more heavily armed, more heavily shielded, more heavily armored, and more tactically orientated version of a Constitution class. It was also larger than a Constitution class starship generally. Although not many Federation class starships were built, and they are canonical, they were built for war. They were built for conflict. So none of this, the Defiant was the first Federation ship built exclusively for war. Now you could argue the terminology there, that the Federation class was not built exclusively for war, it was more of a command and control ship, and it still wasn't as heavily armed as it potentially could have been. Starfleet still could have strapped a lot more phasers onto it. It didn't carry any special weapons different to those of the Constitution class, it simply had more of them and more of an emphasis on its tactical systems, so it was a ship with more power reserves for those combat systems than the Enterprise or other similar Constitution class starships of the era. There's also ships like the Foley class, which I like to mention now just because it's completely non-canon, was actually developed by the guys over at Trek Yards, and I've seen it in multiple fan films by this point, and it's enough for me to call it a beta canon design in and of itself. The Foley class being a variant of the Federation class Dreadnaught, but being much more of a strict combat vessel than the Federation class, but again completely non-canonical. And so here we have the Star Empire. Its very name is evocative of aggression and violence, which again is very antithetical to the Federation. But let's scooch on back to the Star Empire herself. What exactly was she and what was she capable of? It's a little vague. The ship only appears in novels and is, I should express, is also completely beta canon, which means it is not an alpha canon ship. You're never going to hear, unless they decide to make this thing canon, you're never going to hear Janeway reference it in some historical manual, or Cisco go, you know what, Starfleet did once build a combat ship once before, but it was actually a really bad ship. Not bad in the sense that it was poorly designed or badly engineered, bad in the same way the USS Vengeance was a bad ship, which I can draw a direct comparison to as Admiral Marcus, again, probably working with Section 31, developed the USS Vengeance for similar reasons, to oppose the Klingons and fight border skirmishes and wars which he was making up in his head. This ship was built under the same idea and the same pretext, enough that I can turn around and allege that the very story of Into Darkness was based on this novel, because it's so damn similar. But back to the Star Empire herself. She was considerably larger than a Constitution class starship, at least 50% bigger. She was substantially more heavily armed even than a Federation class starship, because unlike a true Federation class starship, she was built purely for war. The actual outer hull of the ship was not built from traditional titanium, but was actually built from a new alloy that was completely phaser resistant, called quantrotrillium? Quantrobrillium? I'm going to put it on the screen. Okay, I'm just going to put that on the screen. I can't pronounce that. It's made from that stuff, and it's meant to be phaser-proof hull. Of course, the ship still had shields, and it would be vulnerable to other types of weapons, I'm going to assume phaser resistant also means disruptor resistant, as fundamentally the two weapons are very similar. But all the same, a tough ship. It was extremely heavily armed and also carried large numbers of fighters in addition to this. The saucer section was not saucer shaped either, it was actually hexagonal, giving the ship for a Federation vessel a somewhat more aggressive looking profile, especially when you're looking at it dorsally or ventrally. It again had the third nacelle. Now the logic, by the way, behind the third nacelle aboard Federation starships, if you get past the whole line of sight thing, which was an original idea for the show, where the warp nacelles, in order to work, you had to have two of them and they had to be in line of sight, or they at least had to have an even number. The third nacelle seems to break that rule, but that all technology evolves. The third nacelle was simply a third nacelle. It was simply more power for more powerful engines. It also meant that if one engine was knocked out, the ship would remain functionally warp capable, if diminished. It also gave it a great more reserve of energy for the propulsion system, giving it a more powerful engine, longer range, maybe greater acceleration, but definitely a more girthy system for sort of like moving the ship through space. So it's got more power to those engines. It's got more stamina. It's basically like adding just literally like adding an extra diesel engine to a car, and just, you know, it may not make it any faster, but it's going to make it more powerful and probably a lot more thirsty. But again, you don't tend to worry about that with your tactical vessels. This was not a ship of exploration. This ship was built to do one thing and one thing only, and to do it very well, and that was lay waste to any Klingon forces it encounters. Any Klingon ship, any Klingon flotilla encountering this vessel would be absolutely obliterated, because they simply wouldn't be able to touch it. The only thing that would work against it would be torpedoes, and this thing could destroy them. A Constitution class ship was more than a match for a D7 or a Katinga class contemporary. This thing was more powerful and larger than a Constitution class. It was a battle group unto itself, and was there to do, again, one thing: destroy the enemy. And it was something it was able to do efficiently, quickly, and very violently. The downside of building something like this is it tends to provoke your enemy to do the similar thing. And also, again, this ship was built in secret without the permission or knowledge of Starfleet Command, and was ultimately shut down by the Federation itself before really being able to be used against the enemies it was built to fight. But all the same, an interesting ship from beta canon that we don't see very much of, and I would actually like to see more ships like this reach canon. I'm actually planning a video to come up soon about starship lineages, a certain sort of back my head canon theory I have about starship designs within Starfleet, about why there's so much variety and change of design, and why actually ships like the USS Enterprise through to the Enterprise D and other such vessels may actually be the freaks of the Navy, not the norm. But we'll get to that in a future episode. For now, if you made it all to this video, and bear in mind I also forgot to turn the camera on for most of the recording of this, which is why the beginning of this video doesn't have any footage of my beautiful self. If you liked what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. Check out the back catalogue of other episodes on this channel. Leave any suggestions for other videos you'd like and topics you'd like me to explore. It doesn't have to be limited to Star Trek. I love all science fiction. And if I know it, that's the big thing. I do get a lot of requests for the Yamato. I do not know anything about that franchise. Manga and that kind of, it's not my thing. I know snippets, not enough to collectively create something. Everything I know would have to come from Google, and I don't like that. So if I know it, and I can, and I have time, please put your suggestions in the comment section down below, and I'll try and get to them at some point. With that said, please like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye-bye.